Grab the microphone from Brenda here. Oh, will you then come on up?
Can I just talk loud?
No, here.
No. Really? 'Cause
We have people with
I
hearing
talk loud
aids.
all the time. You have to use the microphone.
I have to use the microphone.
Okay,
We're getting deaf along here.
before I start, well, my name is Chris Morrissey, for some of you who may not know, married to the mayor.
Oh, yeah, there's the mayor right there.
Has a new nickname, if you read the paper. He is now called Tom T. Morrissey.
Tom
T-E-A.
Tom T. Morrissey. Oh, I haven't read it.
And has been branded Tea Party.
Yeah,
And if you're branded Tea Party, you're a really, really bad person.
I know, losers.
Because I also heard someone else branded Tea Party at a town council meeting last week. Sharon, you came to one too many meetings.
I know, really.
Anyway, I would be very proud of that myself.
Yes.
I hope someday I'll be branded that. I think I will because I'm going to be working on the Trump campaign. It's only a matter of time.
Okay.
There's the tea. Well, so the Trump organization has decided to create their own national organization, separate from what the GOP activities are going on in the different clubs and all. So
Like the RNC.
it's really just to create another group of people totally focused on Trump. The rest of us are focused on everyone else too, which is really critically important, so that this spikes him out. There is a director in the state of Arizona. His name is Drew. He is going to be here next week on Wednesday. I've organized a program to take place here, right where you are, next Wednesday from 6 to 7:30 or so. And what he's going to do is come up and talk to you about that Trump organization, what's going on in that neck of the woods, so we have a better understanding. But also, they're going to conduct a training initiative. And the training has to do with the two areas that they're going to focus on for 2019. The first one is voter registrations, and the second one is volunteers. So he is trying to build his grassroots organization this year by focusing on those two activities. So they're going to divide the state up into different parts. They're going to get different people kind of managing over those parts and doing anything and everything they can to meet those two objectives going into 2020. So this next week, I'm going to read you, because the only way you can find this now is if you're on your computer. And I sent Shirley the link. So you can click on the link. It'll take you to Eventbrite, which a lot of you should be familiar with. It's on there. It's an event. So anyway, this is what they're saying it's about. President Donald J. Trump has officially announced his re-election campaign for 2020, so it's time for committed Republicans to get to work across Arizona. As part of the Trump Victory Leadership Initiative program, we will train activists on how to organize their neighborhoods, recruit volunteers, host a House meeting, and be better advocates for President Trump on social media. On July 24th, as part of the Trump Victory National Week of Training, Arizona Trump Victory will be hosting a TVLI, which is Trump Victory Leadership Initiative, voter registration training, that will give activists the tools and the knowledge of how to run a voter registration drive, why it's important, how to collect issue-based petitions. So there are also petitions they want to get folks to sign. And I don't have those with me, but they'll be at this training next week. Join us on Wednesday, the 24th, Tiny's Restaurant from 6 to 8, and help us get to work on keeping Arizona red and re-electing President Trump. There's a lot of focus on Arizona this time around. They're very concerned and consider it very much a swing state. It may not be so much in our neck of the woods right here, but we can also be asked to go, the Trump team can be asked to go to other parts of the state to help in those parts as well. So we don't necessarily have to stay right in here.
We're going to go to Coconino County.
Yes, well, Coconino is part of the regional breakout that they have.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and I think I told some people, when Tom and I worked for the Trump organization 4 years ago in 2016, or 3 years ago, We ended up on a team that went to Las Vegas for a week.
Oh,
And
that's nice.
we made phone calls and walked neighborhoods and helped in that process. And it was successful too. So they'll do that as well. Anyway, so you'll learn more about it next week. If you have an interest and you want to sign up as a volunteer, you don't necessarily have to travel or anything, but just let us know because there'll be plenty to do. Okay, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Bye. And I forgot to acknowledge those people in our midst. Tom Morrissey is the mayor of Payson. For those of you who have not, our recent members, there's Tom.
And you all are deplorables.
We have
Yay.
a past mayor, Kenny Evans, right here. He served for, did you serve for 6 or 8 years?
8.
8 years. And prior to Craig Swartwood, who served 2 years, and then was followed by Tom the Tea Party Morrissey. Okay. And then, of course, Brenda Barton is our past representative for LD6. Okay, and any other board members for anything? Jim's not here tonight. Janelle, we don't have any other council people here. Well, and then there's me on the Sanitary District Board.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so one other thing that Chris brought to my mind that we discussed at the board meeting is, I was sick for so long, for 6 weeks with my asthma and bronchitis, that I ran out of energy, and we had kind of planned to go down to the music at the park and pass out water bottles and have Tea Party's 10th anniversary birthday cake down there. But we've decided, since the monsoon started and that's winding down, that the other thing that we were planning on doing was going on the radio and explaining what the Tea Party is all about. What are our principles? What are our goals? What is our mission statement? Who belongs to the Tea Party? Because it's open to independents, libertarians, Democrats, those blue dog Democrats that liked Trump and liked Reagan, fiscally conservative, but maybe socially always been a Democrat, and Republicans, of course. So anyhow, we want to welcome other people to come and join us and find out what we're all about. So hopefully in the next, sometime in the next month, we will get maybe a Monday on the KMOG forum, and then also KRIM radio. We have people like Tom Morrissey who have ins at KRIM radio. Are you still doing your music segment?
No, I've been banished from K-Rim.
You've been banished from KRIM. Oh my gosh.
K-Mog now, so.
Blaine?
K-Mog.
Blaine kicked you out?
Not Blaine,
Oh, okay.
the other person.
The other person. Okay. Well, you know what? Politics in Payson this last few years has become very exciting and interesting. Right, Kenny Evans?
Knives in the back.
You hadn't noticed. He's been busy doing other stuff. So with that, Kenny asked me last week if he could come and give you about a 10-minute overview of what is happening over on Mud Springs Road, and to give you information. If you have questions, comments, whatever, how are you going to get those comments to the people in charge? So Kenny, would you like to? Oh, and you know what? I forgot. Our keynote speaker is our Representative Bob Thorpe. Oh my gosh. How did I forget you?
Don't give me a second.
I know, you're wearing such dark clothes, I couldn't see over you.
Would you like
Okay, and here comes Pete Alshier. Yay, Pete. All right. You are just in time. We've completed the formalities, and we're just going to have Kenny give us a little update, and then we're going to go to Bob Thorpe. So good to have you here. Okay, Kenny, do you want to rove in front or behind the table?
your mic?
Okay. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you. Rather done it without the mic, but with the mic, First of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you a little bit. We've had lots of communications, if that's the right word for it. I think Tom T. would probably have a different description of it, but some people thought we were going to be able to build ball fields and leave the trees in the middle of the ball field. And I asked them to give me some kind of an explanation about how we do that, how you have a soccer field or a baseball field and have trees in the middle of it. But we have had lots of people who have asked about why we knock the trees down. Anyone guess what we were told by the fire marshal, how long it would take until we could burn those trees or get them off the site? Jeez, you guys ruined it.
What, did they give the answer without me hearing it?
Say it a little louder. A year.
A year, yeah, usually it's a year.
We're not going to wait a year. As we did, we will have ball fields over there. That'll be a beautiful green area. Those of you who have driven by it probably see it and can have a little better vision for what that will look like with that ball field right there and with a beautiful vista looking down into Granite Dells. Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3 of the process. The original stage was to get the trees down and to start building some ball fields. We had this last week, Mayor Morrissey, was it 38 softball teams?
38.
38 softball teams here in town. And actually we've had to turn away a number of tournaments because we don't have enough ball fields. And certainly having those ball fields will be helpful to bring traffic into town for tournaments, etc. But just as importantly, it'll be a great addition to and will help our young people have a place to go and something to do. In addition to those ball fields, many of you have probably seen some of the schematics for Phase 2 and Phase 3 with a multi-generational center that we're proposing that would include a number of things. We've asked, now you will be the third group that we've gone to and have asked specifically for your feedback about what you think is important to include in a multi-generational center. And we will use those questionnaires to help us decide those things that are most important. On the low end, this facility will cost somewhere between $18 and $22 million, just Phase 1. A town of 15,000, 16,000 people can't pay for that. Mayor Morrissey has to sit and look at the revenue stream and the expense stream. We could do a bond, but if you take a $20 million bond issue, what would be the cost to each person in this town per year? Any guess? A lot. Approximately.
Probably 10,000 a year, because with the school board and what they charge and all that, I don't know.
Yeah, well, actually, if you divide it out by the 15,000 people, it works out to about $300 per person.
$300.
Per person per year. We pay the town currently, our total property tax that go to the town of Payson are in the range of about $100 per household, or about $50 per person per year. So we'd be talking about 6 times as much as we currently pay to the town of Payson just for one facility. So the question is then, is it out of reach? Is it something we just a pie in the sky? How do we go about affording the things that we're asking you should be included in a multi-generational center? And the response is that we have to have multiple revenue streams in order to help support that. So it doesn't fall back on the taxpayer. So it doesn't fall back on memberships where the membership fee is too high. A classic example is one that we're studying right now as a model for what we're doing in the town of Maricopa. How many know where Maricopa is? Maricopa built a multi-generational center a little less than a decade ago. Okay, that multi-generational center is about the same magnitude in terms of size of what we're proposing for Payson. They got a $7 million contribution from the Ak-Chin Indian tribe to help them cover their operating maintenance and expenses, so the O&M costs, to keep that low enough that the community could afford to use it. That was in 2011. Guess how much of that $7 million is left? So they've blown through that entire endowment in less than a decade, and the cost is now going to have to be borne by the community itself. So our goal is to use a public-private partnership so that we can get the maximum bang for our buck, and at the same time reduce the load both on the town of Payson and on the individual citizens who will use the facilities. So with that, I'm done. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. So,
I don't want to bring up the guy from Canada who wants the hockey rinks and stuff like that, but is there any way we can find someone like him who's got bad to the belt for you, who's anxious to do something, who can come in and help us with that project without taking it over?
yes.
Good.
One of the reasons we created the Rim Country Educational Alliance was to be able to retain local control, and that will be the case. And there are to date, we're working with 9 different entities that would each take some piece of that multi-generational center and say, this is something that would benefit us. We won't have to put the capital in. That way we won't have to worry about O&M. We'll worry about staffing and our mission statement. And so each of them will carry part of that load, and 9 people carrying the load makes it a whole lot easier than if you just depend on the taxpayers and try to extort the money from them through their taxes. I'm sorry, extort's the wrong word.
That's correct. That's correct.
Pass it on to the taxpayers with their considerable support and permission. Marilyn?
So the ball field is one of the main things. What?
Ball fields, plural.
Fields.
Multiple soccer, baseball, and football fields.
Okay.
Baseball, softball combination, football, soccer combination.
So what are the other things that's in this multi thing you're talking about?
Multi-generational center would be a training facility, would be a community, what you and I would call a community center. That would have, as the questionnaire is out there right now, the responses we're getting back, an aquatic center is very high on the list of people who are responding of what we would need in this facility. A large room that could be divided into sections so you could have groups meet, like this group, but large groups, up to 500, 700 people. Meeting rooms, multiple meeting rooms, plus a large assembly hall where you could have large gatherings. Currently, as many of you know, MHA has had a function here for decades, for a decade and a half, and there's only one place in town that we can go, and that's the casino. We have now outgrown it. The Women's Wellness Forum has to limit. The last 4 years, we've had to stop registrations for the Women's Forum generally about 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time because we have no more room for them. And so a room that could be opened up could be used for sports at some time, but could be used for large meeting room, as a large meeting room. Yes?
Last time you were here, you mentioned you're going to do ball fields and then the community center or whatever. Do you have a timeline on when it's going to be done? Or?
Ask the fire marshal when he's going to give us permission to get rid of those stupid trees.
Can you haul them away?
One of the challenges we have with trying to haul away trees at this place is where do you haul them to? Our landfills really don't need that much additional material put into it. So we're working with people. We've had 2 or 3 crews stop by that want wood for firewood, and we've allowed them to go out there and cut that firewood, get the good stuff out. Once we get the big stuff out, the remainder, the manzanita, the oak, the scrub oak will burn pretty quickly and pretty easily.
Marshmallow roast.
Marshmallow roast, big marshmallow or a long stick.
Okay. Explain the public-private partnership, how much you plan on wanting from the town, and membership dues from the people that use the facilities?
We were doing that modeling now. It really depends a lot on what we get back from you in terms of what it is you would like to have. Everybody wants a new Mercedes and they want to pay the price of a 52 Volkswagen for it. So the classic example is once we get this back, we will begin to be able to make some kind of a reasonable estimate. In terms of current, if the town and if the people decide that they really want an aquatic center there, the current revenue stream that goes to pay for trying to maintain and keep Taylor Pool going, which Mayor Morrissey's here, but when I left that scene 4 or 5 years ago, it was about $200,000, $220,000 a year that we expend over and above what we get back in fees. Is that about right? And that's for 6 weeks?
6 to 8 weeks.
6 to 8 weeks in the summer versus year-round. So we would look at that revenue stream. We would look at the revenue stream from the use of ball fields and other facilities. We have 2 other major players in town that would also be supporting it. So our goal is to say we've got to keep that cost per month, per family, or per individual down to where it's affordable for people in Payson, not affordable for the people in Scottsdale. Yes.
Okay, so I'm assuming that the varsity ice hockey academy is still,
We're still talking with them as one of those revenue sources, but as you saw over there, they have contributed nothing to date in terms of money. So our goal is to say we're going ahead with the things the town of Payson needs. If we can get somebody like a sports academy to come in and help buoy up the operating cost and maintenance of the facility, great. That means that we can build more of the things the town wants. If we don't, we're still going forward.
so you can do it without a big anchor like a sports academy?
How big would that big anchor tenant have to be, I guess? MHA Foundation, which is underwriting the RCEA, is the largest nonprofit in rural Arizona. Glenn and then Val.
I know nothing about the chain of command of the legal transfer of that property from the Forest Service, but I was told by a very reliable source that the Forest Service is concerned that that property will only be used for educational facilities.
That's a pile of crap. Excuse me, I need to be more technical about it. That title was transferred free and clear. I signed it. Okay?
No, I don't know.
I had more than 500 pages of documents we submitted to them that enumerated all the things that it could be. And all of those things are identified in something in the town code column EF, educational facility. And all those things are within the scope of what we're preparing to do here.
Okay, Kenny? Oh,
Well-
do you have somebody else before me?
To what extent does this fit in with the Payson master plan?
It fits completely within the Payson master plan that was approved by the voters and then was reapproved about 4 years ago.
There's always supposed to be a park in the southeast part.
Yes, there was, in fact, before we had it, when it was still Forest Service land, that was identified in that master plan, those that worked on that master plan.
Kenny, you said there's a questionnaire. I haven't seen a questionnaire. Where do we get a questionnaire? What is
There are multiple ways. I think I handed out one for everybody.
Well, there's
If I did
people that
not,
have come in late, and so
Almost everybody.
I always get missed.
And for anybody that's missed, you
All
can
right.
also go to the MHA Foundation website, and if you look there, there's a link to fillable questionnaire, and you can actually go online and just type your responses there and get them to us. I would, if you feel comfortable doing it, if you can fill those out and hand them to me, I will hand deliver them to the committee that's working on this.
Okay.
But if not, get them back to Shirley, and she knows where they
Yeah,
live.
I know where he is. Okay, and you said one other thing that you wanted to tell us is a contact for questions. Do we contact you, or
You're
do we
welcome.
do we go to the MHA office and ask questions, or what?
You're welcome to contact me, you're welcome to go to the MHA website, you're welcome to go to any of the staff people in the MHA office there. It's 308 East Arrow.
Yeah.
just east of the, excuse me, just west of the LDS Church.
And Arrow's the one that turns into Continental.
Yes, and
You know,
Barb?
speaking for myself, I'm excited about this happening.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people are. I think it's a good, clean industry, if you will, to bring to town. And obviously will generate businesses around it also.
Possibly, but there, one of the things about Payson is we are culturally and environmentally rich and land poor.
Yeah.
We just don't have much land to develop if you look around, which concerns me when people are, taking more land out of, this is land that was destined to be in the Forest Service forever until we were able to successfully negotiate with them and acquire it. Yes.
Maybe I missed, when groundbreaking?
They need to acknowledge you,
Oh,
Councilman.
hi, Jim. Would you like to ask a question of Mr. Evans?
Yes, I would. Hi, my name is Jim Ferris. I'm from Payson, Arizona.
And you are a town councilor.
And I was just wondering if anyone asked, or there was a little more specific, when groundbreaking would happen for the construction.
It's happened, Jim.
It's happened.
It's happening now.
It's happening now, and if you go there in the southwest corner of the property, we've actually taken out a 60-foot by 100-foot section of ground there for the future control center for broadband for this whole quarter of the state of Arizona.
Oh, nice.
So you'll see that area is already
I
being
was-
built up.
I was talking about the aquatic, the community center.
We're working now to try to make sure that we get the input before we start, as opposed to start and then go back and try to get input. So you were here late, I'll get you one of those.
Did you get a question there?
I have the
Yeah,
sheet.
so once we've been able to digest what it is the town wants and can put a dollar and cents figure on it, we're literally, we're chomping at the bit to get out there and start construction.
So, well, within 2 years.
Oh, no, well within months. We didn't knock the trees down to just what's the low.
Okay, good.
All right, is that it?
Yay.
Kenny, thank you so much for,
One other volunteer, we will put a team and come to you if you have community groups or other groups that would like to talk to us. We would be happy to come and talk with you. More importantly, we'd be more than happy to hear from you what you really think is important. They say just remember that the more we ask for, there are facilities that we've evaluated, the 19 we've evaluated, that run up in price to almost $80 million. That's beyond what we can afford. But within the scope of what we can afford, we want to make sure that we prioritize those things and do those things that the citizens of Payson will benefit most from.
all righty.
Right. There you go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And next, we have our state representative who has served in the House for 8 years. 7 years, he's got 1 year to go, Bob Thorpe. And I put all the things that he was, the committees he was on and what he was chaired and all that stuff, and I sent out the MailChimp 2 weeks ago with that information, but I didn't save my updates, and so all you got was Bob Thorpe is coming. So anyhow, he's going to tell you what committees he has served on, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Shirley. And thank you, Earl. I really appreciate being here. And Payson has always treated me wonderfully when I've been in town, and I always enjoy coming back. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I was going to start off with, just real quickly, I'm sure some of you know that Robert Mueller, is it Mueller or Mueller? Mueller. He's going to go before Congress and talk about, his, I actually got the stats here, 448-page, $25 million report that he did on our president. And so I asked a cowboy friend of mine. He actually used to manage a number of ranches and moved cattle around up in northern Arizona. Asked him if he could explain exactly what the 448-page report said. And so the first half of the report basically says the president didn't steal any horses because we just checked the corral and none are missing. That's the first half of the report. The second half of the report says, but even though he's not a horse thief, he's probably guilty of not wanting to be hung. So that gives you a little bit of horse sense. So I've served, I was very honored to serve with Brenda down at the Capitol until Brenda got termed out. Oh, I'm getting the cue, I'm not holding this close enough. So, and working with Brenda is always terrific. She had a great office. It was like a bowling alley. It was really long. You could certainly set up pins at one end of the office. It was pretty neat. But I've been now at the Capitol for serving in the House of Representatives for 7 years. I come from a business background. My first job out of college, I was a Walt Disney Imagineer. I went on to build simulators and training devices for the military, the F-18, F-16, and the Apache helicopter. Earlier today, I was addressing a group of the MOAA, the Military Officers Association of America, and that was really a lot of fun. And talking, because I'm a really big supporter of our veterans issues and our military. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk a little bit about first, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm doing during this off session. Just a couple of things. I'm going to talk about what happened down at the Capitol this year. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm going to be doing after I'm done in the House. And so bear with me. I have just notes to remind me and kind of keep me focused on what I want to discuss this evening. So one thing came up about 2 weeks ago. I was contacted by the Maricopa Treasurer's Office. We had a disabled American veteran who had paid cash for a mobile home down in Maricopa, gotten bad information from the Sheriff's Office, and his home got put up for a lien sale because he owed $220 in 2018 property taxes. So if he had been living in a traditional home, to go through the lien process usually takes a couple of years. But for whatever reason, our mobile home laws are such that you can almost accelerate the process and get somebody removed from their home within about 30 days. And so a guy came in and bought it for $4,400. And we tried to buy it back for the veteran, and he now wants $52,000 for the home that he paid $4,400 for. So I've been writing press releases and trying to get attention to this and working with Russell Pierce and the Maricopa Treasurer's Office. And we're hoping that we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel to try to get some justice for this veteran. I've had groups come forward that I work with that are willing to pay for the back property tax that are due. And it's just a matter of kind of navigating the swamp at this point. So that's one of the things I've been kind of focusing on the last week and a half. This next week I'm going to be in Sedona. I'm not sure how big a problem it's been here in the Payson area, but vacation rentals certainly are of concern to the citizens in Sedona. I'm sure we've had some problems here, certainly had some problems up in the Flagstaff area. So we're going to have a stakeholders meeting over in Sedona to talk about a recent piece of legislation to deal with the vacation rentals, and what we're talking about is short-term rentals. And we're not talking about somebody renting your house for 30 days. It's usually 1 or 2 or 3 days. And one problem that we tried to solve legislatively this last session, or this current year, was to ban party houses, where you have 20 cars show up from all with California license plates, and they're partying in your neighborhood. So there's numerous problems associated with the whole vacation rental kind of business type plan that we've seen occur kind of morph within Northern Arizona. We're going to try to address that. Last week, we did have a meeting down, a stakeholders meeting, or I held a stakeholders meeting down in Phoenix at the Capitol to talk about mobile home issues. So one of the issues we talked about, and this disabled vet was able to join us at the meeting, was just problems associated with mobile homes. In Maricopa this last year, we had 7,000 abandoned mobile homes where people just walked away from the home. Causes a lot of problems. We've had kind of unscrupulous people then take kind of this, quasi-ownership of the home, even though they don't own the home.
They're
And
squatters.
not squatters, but what they'll do is they'll rent out the home without owning it.
Oh.
Or we've even had situations where they'll sell the home to somebody without owning it. And then, and we've had situations where then the new owner all of a sudden is being evicted because they didn't know property tax was due on the home. So there's a number of issues associated with mobile home ownership that we're going to try to, or I'm going to try to address legislatively, and I'm working with a group of people to try to do that. Another thing I've been working on for the last couple of years is affordable housing. And I was just told that our Arizona Department of Veterans Affairs considers affordable housing at one of the top of their lists with regard to trying to curb and reduce the number of veteran suicides. The idea being that when veterans lose their homes and they end up out in the street, psychologically that has a huge negative impact on their lives. And so we're trying to utilize a 1980s Reagan era program here in Arizona. We've been working on this for the last couple of years, where, for example, we'd be asking the federal government to provide $5 million, the state would provide $5 million to build affordable housing throughout the state. And so from that, of course, people that don't currently live in a home are all of a sudden living in a home and paying property tax, which of course helps education. Home ownership is where property taxes come from. That's where we fund education from. So there's a benefit there, getting people plugged into home ownership. And then also just the construction efforts of building these affordable homes I think it's about a 20-to-1 return on investment as far as the amount of economic activity that occurs when we do this. Shirley was mentioning what I've been doing down at the Capitol. I'm chairman of technology, and I also serve on the transportation, on the government committee, as well as on the elections committee. So I have four assignments. In addition to that, I'm co-chair of the Aviation Caucus. This is a group of people interested in aviation here in Arizona because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I'm also co-chair of the Mining Caucus, which is, again, a multi-billion-dollar industry throughout the state of Arizona. Here in Arizona, Brenda would agree, you either grow it or you mine it, pretty much.
That's it.
And so mining is incredibly important. Brenda and I, you went down the Resolution mine, did you?
Yes, sir.
So the Resolution mine, we got dressed up in mining gear and got into a little a capsule, if you will, that's suspended by a cable, and we're dropped down, 6,500 feet to the bottom of the deepest mine in northern Arizona. Or excuse me, the deepest mine in the United States, but it's also deepest here in Arizona as well. Pretty wild experience, and so mining is incredibly important to the state of Arizona. In addition to that, I'm very supportive of our Boy Scouts. Go to all the Eagle Scout ceremonies, and I've been told by military members of our military that when they get recruits that are Eagle Scouts, they usually kind of breeze through things like basic training. They really turn into incredible servicemen and women. So that's an important part of what I do. In addition, my concern with regard to the homeless, I'm an ambassador for Phoenix Rescue Mission down and work very closely with that effort. It's estimated that it's between $30,000 and $40,000 to have a homeless person on the street, which sounds incredible, doesn't it? But when you consider all the different government agencies that respond, we're talking emergency medical, police, trying to put them up in temporary shelters, food, the housing, medical care, things like that. It's really expensive. And so organizations like Phoenix Rescue Mission, they're trying to take people that have ended up on the street and plug them back into society, plug them back into their families. And it's a really terrific program. Really appreciate all the fine work that they do. Education is always an issue. Down at the Capitol, we're always told that we don't spend enough money on education. Currently, we're at about 55% of our state budget goes towards education. The governor brought forward his plan, 20 by 2020, which is intended to provide pay raises for teachers as well as more money for school districts. The problem with pay raises for teachers is it's not up to the legislature to tell the school districts how to use that money. So we provide additional funds to our school districts, but it's really up to the school districts and the boards to decide how that money is used. So we've seen some school districts provide pay raises for their teachers, and others haven't been quite as generous. They've used the money in other ways. Here in Arizona, I'm extremely proud of our state because we have a lot of options for education, a lot of choices for education. So for example, we have charter schools, private schools, public schools, homeschooling. So parents have those choices. In addition to that, we have ESAs, Empowerment Scholarship Accounts, where if somebody, for example, the way we would hope that those monies would be used, and it's only the state portion of a child's tuition. You can imagine a situation where you have a special needs child and the local schools just are not providing it. And if the parents wanted to take some of that ESA dollars and use it towards a better environment for their child, that's what those dollars are for. Out of the over 1 million students in Arizona, at last count, I think it was around 5,000 are actually using the ESA program. So it's a pretty small amount. And it doesn't take away from taxpayers at the local level. It's really state dollars, a state contribution to school districts that parents can take advantage of. I was, a couple years ago, I was named Community College Legislator of the Year. And so I've been very interested in our community colleges, really trying to get more money into our colleges. Here, of course, we have a provisional college that we've been trying to get to the point of being credentialed in Gila County, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that at some point in the future. But we did provide additional money for our colleges, community colleges. I did want to mention, I had a note here for this, I have some printouts. This was an article that was published by the Farm Bureau, and I was asked a number of different questions about how our forests, the health of our forests, has a direct impact on farming. And we actually started the conversation by saying, how does Northern Arizona forests impact the farmers down in Yuma County? And so if anyone wants to take a copy of that, please grab one before you leave today and take a look and see what you think. As far as our legislative session, this was the second longest legislative session since I've been down at the Capitol. We ended up a couple days before the Memorial Weekend. We were working 14 and 18-hour days, and then we came back on Memorial Day, started at about 10 that morning, got done at 1:30 the next morning. And so the first time that we've actually worked on Memorial Day down at the Capitol. The nice thing is that we had a lot more money, and the revenue that came into the state was greater than I've seen since I've been down at the Capitol for the last 7 years. We received more money, not because we increased taxes, it's actually the opposite. Over the years that I've been down here, we've actually multiple times, we've decreased taxes on both individuals, businesses, and corporations. But we've created an environment, and I need to give a lot of accolades both to our governor as well as to the legislature in creating an environment where we really want businesses to prosper. We want individuals to have opportunities to have good jobs. And that's exactly what's happening in Arizona. Some of the national publications are looking at Arizona as a terrific place to do business, a growing state. And so we've really turned things around since kind of the dark days of 2007, 2008, when we were kind of in the Great Recession. With that money, I wanted to kind of go over some of the things that we were able to accomplish. Saving taxes is extremely important from my perspective, and reducing the tax burden on our citizens. So we had a bill at the beginning of the session to conform Arizona income taxes in line with the federal income tax bill that was passed, I think it was in 2017, December of 2017. And so we quickly, at the beginning of the session, we got a bill up to the governor that did that very thing. It was a conformity bill to conform our taxes, and the governor vetoed it, which was not what we were expecting, and we were pretty disappointed. So what we were able to do is, in the budget, we worked with the governor's office, and we crafted the conformity language that we wanted. It wasn't perfect, but it was pretty close to what we wanted in the original bill, and we integrated that into our budget, and we were able to get that enacted and passed by the governor. What that means for our taxpayers, our citizens, is approximately $220 million in savings each year for our taxpayers. And so I'm very excited about that. Some of you have been concerned and have expressed your concerns about our $32 VLT on your car registration. And so the governor at first didn't want to let that go at all, because it's bringing in a lot of revenue. So we had quite a few discussions and told the governor that it was part of our plan down at the legislature that we needed to eliminate that $32 per vehicle VLT. And so the governor then said we could phase it out in 5 years. We kind of held our ground and said no, 5 years is too long. At the end, what we did was we negotiated it in the budget that we'd eliminate it in 2 years. So our fiscal year started this year, so we should have 2 more years after July 1st of this year before that's completely eliminated. One of the things that was missing in the budget that was brought to my attention is money for our parole officers. And probably some of you might not think that that is necessarily a big issue. So it was $2.4 million for our parole officers. And of course what parole officers do is they divert people from being in jail and being incarcerated. So what does that $2.4 million investment actually do for our taxpayers? It's estimated, and they're good estimates, that it's saving us about $60 million a year by not having these individuals in prison or in jail. So $2.4 million to get a $60 million return on investment, which is pretty nice, pretty sizable. One of the things we haven't been able to calculate is for those individuals that would be in jail if we didn't have the parole officers, what is the cost of plugging them back into society after they're done with their jail term? Because being incarcerated, it completely messes up your life. If you have a business, if you have a job, plugging those people back into society after they're done serving their time can be very difficult. So there's costs associated with that as well. But then in addition to that, something else that we can really put our arms around is when people are on parole, they're able to have a job. They, of course, have to be under the supervision of their parole officer. But they're able to have a job and pay back their fines and restitution. You know, if they committed criminal acts, maybe stole things, they can pay back those victims. That works out to be about $50 million a year. So for a $2.4 million investment, we're looking at approximately tangible, we're looking at about $110 million in savings for our taxpayers. And that's one of the things I truly appreciate when looking at things that we can do in a positive way down at the Capitol. To be able to, my litmus test is we have, if we're going to do a program, we need to at least save or hold the taxpayers, harmless, if you will, if we're going to be investing money. But even better yet, if we can invest money that you get a return on that investment, that really helps out with our taxpayers. We had a bill, $18 million, that money was divided up among the 91 incorporated cities and towns. And so for those cities and towns that have been kind of, going through hard times, I look at Navajo County in particular. They've really had some financial challenges in Navajo. Snowflake, Taylor, Holbrook, and others. It worked out to be about almost $198,000 per city and town that they could use to put into their local budget and help kind of plug shortages within their budgets. I personally, over the last couple of years, have been trying to save money for our counties. So for Gila County and other counties. We've had a lot of funds transfers, if you will, over the years, where the counties had to pay money out to the state government, out to the state revenues. And so I've been able to change a lot of that. I started off with something called the duck pool, and then we were able to eliminate money that the counties had to pay into our juvenile court system. That was about $11 million a year. And then the latest was each of the counties has an obligation to fund the pensions of our judges. And so we were able to get $3 million in the budget to help our counties. I think it was 12 of our smallest counties with that pension obligation. And so each of those counties is receiving $250,000 to go towards the pensions. And if that money isn't available, then basically the local taxpayers have to pay that money. And so altogether, I've been able to save our counties about $15 million over the last couple of years. One problem statewide that we've had is not having enough money for the providers that work with our intellectually, developmentally disabled adults. And throughout the state, we have these service providers. They haven't had increases in the amount of money, so we were able to put $40 million towards that. And so that really helps those families that have these adults. We have one mother and father that I met who are in their 80s. Their daughter has been in one of these service providers. She's 60 years old, and she's been in that service provider for 50 years. And so it's really tough, very, very difficult on families when they have those challenges with their children. We were able to put $40 million into expansion of I-17. And so any of you that drive up and down I-17 down in the valley, you know that there are times when we have traffic accidents where it absolutely snarls I-17. So from the overlook down to Black Canyon City, we're going to be adding lanes and having kind of like flex lanes. And that should help, because those are some of the more congested areas going up and down the hill. When I'm driving back up the hill, you're coming up that steep incline, and you'll have one truck that's doing 40 miles an hour passing another truck that's doing 39 miles an hour, and you get stuck behind them for like the next 20 minutes. It's pretty terrible. In the past 10 years or so, we've actually past governors and past legislatures have, as we've gone through tough times, have swept money out of our aviation fund. So each pilot that owns an airplane buys fuel, buys insurance, everything associated with owning an airplane pays into this aviation fund. It's a user fund. Well, we've swept $100 million out of it. over the last decade. So we were able to put $10 million back into it. And what's nice about that is that $10 million can draw down about $100 million in federal dollars. It's a 10-to-1 match for maintaining, especially our rural airports like the one that we have just up the hill here. It's estimated by ADOT that we have about $88 million in just concrete work to do with our rural airports. So this $10 million will hopefully draw down about $100 million that we can do those kinds of improvements for our airports. So the last thing I was going to talk about with regard to the budget was the governor wanted $500 million invested into our rainy day fund. And I think his intention was that when he became governor, there was a $1 billion deficit. Now, as he's ending his career as governor, he'd like a $1 billion surplus. So we were able to convince the governor to break that up into 2 payments. So we put in $271 million into the rainy day fund. We'll put an identical amount in next year as well. And that will bring the rainy day fund up to $1 billion. A lot of the members, including me, were terribly happy with it as kind of a bitter pill to swallow because we could use that money elsewhere. We could buy down debt, we could do infrastructure improvements, things like that. So it was a little bit tough to put that money aside, but that was something the governor was really demanding that would be in the budget. We had a lot of different bills that came up throughout the session, and what we're going to do in a moment is I'm happy to do kind of a Q&A if any of you have questions about some of the other things that happened during the session. I did want to talk about, and matter of fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to pass this around. Collecting signatures for next year to be able to get my name on the ballot for the state senate. I am termed out in the House, just like Brenda was this last election. Excuse me, I'm stepping on this. And so oftentimes we need to collect about 800 or more signatures to have our name on the ballot. So if you're a registered Republican or an independent, you can go ahead and sign my petition form, and it would be greatly appreciated. And once again, if anyone who wants to pick up one of these Farm Bureau articles, I'd be thrilled if you took it home and took a look at it and see some things I have to say about forest restoration and conservation. With regard to the Senate race, so currently we have Sylvia Allen changed her mind. She had said she wasn't going to run, so Sylvia's in the race, I'm in the race, and then Wendy Rogers is in the race. So we have 3 people in the race, which makes it difficult having a primary like that because you have to spend money on the primary, and then when you get to the general election, you have to spend money on the general election. We have so far just one Democrat who I faced in the House race this last time who has decided to run for the Senate. So that's kind of what makes up the Senate race. Once again, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the race as well. Just to let you know, there really isn't a lot of difference between the House and the Senate, other than really the number of people that serve. So in the House, we have 60 legislators. In the Senate, we have 30 senators. Other than that, we get paid the same. We all have staff associated with trying to work on our bills and the budget. And the way bills are created, the way laws are created is identical. A law can be created, a bill can be created in the House, which then has to go over to the Senate, or it can be created in the Senate and then comes to the House. In either case, you have to get both bodies, simple majorities in most cases, to agree to a bill before it goes up to the governor for his signature.
And I must remind everybody what I said last week because Wendy Rogers has been going on her bicycle around Star Valley and Payson, getting signatures on her petitions to run for Senate. So there's 3 people running. You can sign one person's petition. If you sign somebody's petition that you decide you change your mind and you want to sign the other person's, then I still haven't been able to download because my printer's broken. to download the paper that removes your name from one person's petition so you can sign somebody else's and it has to go down to the Secretary of State. So keep that in mind. Sylvia Allen will be here next week so you can hear from her. However, that's all I'll say right now.
And I'd like to explain one thing. With the House race, we have 2 open seats every time we have an election for the House. So you can actually sign 2 petitions for the people running for the House. For the Senate, because we're only looking at one candidate getting past the primary, then it's best only to sign one petition for a Senate candidate. With regard, because Wendy's name was brought up, I've known Wendy for a number of years. She actually lives down in Tempe, so she doesn't live in northern Arizona, and this will be the 12th year that she's run for office, or some office.
Sixth race.
So she's run, if you go back a decade, she ran for state senate, then she ran for Congress, and I think it was in CD 8 or 9. She did that for 2 times, and then she came up to northern Arizona and ran for CD 1 2 times, and now she's running for state senate again. So in her 10 years of running every other year, one of the newspapers down the valley referred to her as the biennial candidate because she runs every 2 years. She's never been able to defeat the Democrats that she's been up against. And in most cases, I think in the majority of the cases, she hasn't gotten past the primary. So I'm a little bit unclear why, if she lives in Tempe, while she's running in northern Arizona, but she is. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Okay, Bill, wait for the microphone. And Marlene has the microphone for that side of the room. I have the microphone for this side. And the rules are, we alternate. So if Bill starts there, then the second question comes from this side of the room. Okay? So Bill's always first.
I assume that, like the U.S. government, the senators run for 6 years and representatives for 2 years? No. That's a difference you didn't mention.
Oh, sorry.
One's having to reinstate your position every 2 years as opposed to 6 years. It makes a difference financially. If you could comment on that briefly. The question I had, I'm sorry about the speaker here. The question I had is about term limits, and you discussed it and we're experiencing it here. The U.S. government lets a senator or a congressman, I can think of a few that have been 40, 50 years, that died in office at 150 years old, and yet in Phoenix we have to stick to the one term. And is that because nobody is able to figure out which is better? And obviously, when you get voted on and you win, or you lose, that's a term limit too. So if you would discuss term limits both ways, thank you.
Happy to. And so, yeah, I'm glad you brought up the point. So in either the House or the Senate, you run for 2 years. It's a 2-year term. And so, as I mentioned a moment ago, the pay is identical, the responsibilities are identical. The difference is between just the number of senators is 30, the number of House members is 60. By the way, does this sound okay? Can you hear me okay?
Well, Bill was way too loud, and I was trying to...
Yeah, it sounded like it's a little bit...
But you need to hold that one up.
Okay, very good. And so I don't even recall exactly when it was put into law, but it was a voter referendum that established term limits for the state of Arizona. And there I am.
There we go.
And so,
How do you turn this
and so the way term limits work here in Arizona is a lot of the members down at the Capitol, if a member is termed out, let's say you're in the House and you're termed out, oftentimes the senator will choose to allow, kind of switch, if you will, and allow that termed out member to run for the other body and vice versa. No requirement to do that, but it's kind of, trying to work and help out your seatmate as far as that goes. And I'm trying to think if there's another part of your question. 2 years, the way term limits work, and that was it. And so another way that term limits also work is, for example, if you hit your 8 years and you decide not to run again, and you sit out for 2 or 4 or 6 years, you can come back and run again as well. So that's an option.
Okay.
Another
All right.
question.
We have Tom T. Martin.
Tom Tea Party.
Mr. Baker.
For all of you deplorables. Bob, I got a question and then a suggestion. I'll be quick with both. I know you're aware of the Lion Springs expansion. Okay, I'm working with the governor's office, with Ben Blank from the governor's office, Dan Scarpinato, about getting that back into the 5-year plan. What are your thoughts on that? Why did it just disappear from the 5-year plan?
Goodness, I haven't had that conversation. I don't know if I'm an expert on that. However, you and I should probably talk about it, and that's something if I can help down at the Capitol.
Yeah, well, you're shaking your head no. Is that an indication that we need to keep it between us? Or?
No, an indication that I really don't have very much information.
Oh,
information on it.
Okay, well, I'd like to have that.
I apologize.
And the suggestion is this. Sylvia and Walt and you have been an incredible team representing us.
Thank you.
And I hate to see, a battle between you and Sylvia.
Right.
Wendy Rogers is not a non-starter. But have you, would I be out of line by asking maybe Sylvia could run for the open seat and keep the team together?
Sure.
We're working on that.
So, yeah, little political baseball, behind the curtain type stuff. So during the years that I've run, and Brenda has run for the House, we've actually been fairly fortunate in that most of the people that have run against us in the House, or the Democrats that have run against us, have never been elected. They haven't had any real campaigning experience. It's always a challenge to run a campaign, whether you're Republican or Democrat, it's a challenge to raise money and to run that campaign. This coming election is going to be very different. So we have 2 liberals, both from the Flagstaff area, that have filed for the House, both eyeballing my seat, but maybe even trying to take Walt out as well. One person is the current mayor of Flagstaff, very kind of far left lady. The other person is, he's been in the Coconino County Supervisors for 8 years, Art Babbitt. And what's funny about him is a lot of people think he's associated with the Babbitt family, but he's not. It's spelled differently, but he doesn't correct people too often when they make that mistake. He's a Bernie Sanders guy. And so we have a problem in this next election as far as the House goes. Because we have 2 Democrats, 2 liberals that have experience running campaigns, they have experience raising money, and they really have kind of statewide name ID. So when Sylvia originally mentioned that she was going to run for the Senate again, I had that conversation with her, and I think other people have had that conversation with her as well, that it would certainly help Walt if the 2 of them ran as a ticket. You'd have 2 incumbent Republicans with good name ID in our district running against these 2 liberals that also have very good name ID in northern Arizona. And so I think that would really help our chances of retaining our House seats. And for Sylvia, I think Sylvia genuinely has concerns about things that she wants to accomplish in education. Unfortunately, she's not really making, from my perspective, not making a really strong argument about that she wants to remain in the Senate as education chair to kind of do her agenda, her education agenda, but she could do the same thing over the House. Matter of fact, yeah, I'm sure the Speaker of the House would either, allow her to be either the chair of education in the House or the vice chair of education in the House. So she could accomplish the exact same things over the House as she could over the Senate. So yeah, it would. I think for LD6, I think it would really help if she might consider running for the House.
Okay, that side of the room, is there a question? Well then, this side of the room.
I just wanted to follow up with that. Lion Springs, I think I went to the Transportation Committee meeting that was over at Lakeside Pine Top, and they were asked, I can't remember the gentleman's name, I think from Globe, that put in for an amendment to their report to put Lion Springs back in, and they were all arguing against it, and going back to this point system that they have. And to me, it's like the computer model for global warming that never panned out. And then they talked about some other things that could come on or drop, and they were talking about intangible factors. Well, I'm going, Lion Springs has intangible factors, some huge ones.
Right.
So I mean, that was kind of frustrating leaving there and not having that done. One other thing I was wondering with the transportation, you were talking about the $32 registration fee dropping off in 2 years, is there was a lot of money out of the HERF tax. It went to DPS.
Yeah.
And is there any reason, I guess if there was an increase in tax, and I might not be in a friendly crowd by making this kind of suggestion, but the gasoline tax has not gone up in a number of years, and there's a lot of fuel efficient, or electric cars that aren't paying into it anymore. So that's going down. And wouldn't there be some effort maybe to make sure that those vehicles that are using our roadways would also be paying, and then if that income increase, I'm looking at Genoa getting more money than, or Genoa, Payson, I'm going back to Payson getting more money for their local streets. Do you have any comment about those?
Absolutely. So we had bills come through the Transportation Committee. They weren't my bills, but trying to address the idea of increasing the per gallon HERF. So if we go back to the mid-1990s, HERF was set at 18 cents per gallon. And of course, mid-1990s, the cars weren't nearly as fuel efficient as the ones we have now. I have a Toyota out here. It's a Camry hybrid. When I drive down the hill and get down to Phoenix, and the whole time I'm in Phoenix, it's around 42 miles per gallon. So I'm not paying as much tax as if I had a F-150 truck and I was driving it up and down the hill. So the cars that are driving on the roads are doing the same amount of damage, if you will, road use, that where repair has to occur. It's immaterial whether it's a all-electric vehicle, it's a hybrid vehicle, or conventional vehicle. So one of the things that we tried to do is we tried to address this, the 18 cents per gallon, try to raise that up. And at the same time, in the same bill, we also tried to address bringing in those vehicles that aren't currently paying their fair share. And neither bill moved forward. In all truth, from my perspective, if we're talking about increasing taxes on people, I would much rather go to the voters to do something like that. However, with regard to the electric vehicles, the compressed natural gas vehicles, I think that would actually, if we no longer gave them kind of that carve out, I think that was, I've heard estimates of between $350 million of additional revenue that could be used in our HERF. The HERF sweeps, we got commitments from the governor that he would not sweep HERF anymore. It is constitutional to take HERF dollars and use it for DPS. It's completely constitutional, but it's about $125 million. And so if you look at the California model, and I know that some of you might not have the greatest deal of love for California, but if you look at the California model, the VLT that we have is a way of funding highway patrol. That's the way they do it in California. They have an assessment on vehicle registration. I did a calculation a year or two ago, and I came up, so right now it's $32. I came up between $9 and $12 per vehicle would fully fund highway patrol. And so it'd be a much smaller assessment. So I still think that that's a good way of doing it. If we did something like that, and we took that $125 million that currently goes towards DPS, and reinvested it in both our local communities, our cities, our counties, as well as our state roads, because that HERF money also funds our state roads. Now, when you get out on the interstate, of course, it's a combination of federal dollars and state dollars that maintains I-40, I-17, things like that.
I was thinking there was an increase in the registration fee on those higher efficiency electric cars. That's definitely hitting Arizona residents.
Right.
The higher gasoline tax with all the people from out of state, they're paying a lot of that. So it's kind of, or maybe there could be a combination
The
of.
electric people still aren't paying it
Yeah.
unless you attach it to where they plug it in. When they're drawing electricity,
Okay, that's
they
true.
need to pay it at that point.
Yeah,
They're not doing
Or
it.
on the registration.
What we were trying to come up with,
Do both.
what we were trying to come up with was an estimate of how many miles a person. So if you had an all-electric vehicle, how many miles are you actually driving? And come up with some kind of formula where they were paying equivalent to a conventional vehicle. And I think that that's fairness that we're shooting for.
Okay,
Anyone else?
Ms. Gordon, or you?
I just want to say this, don't the electric cars also have gasoline, don't they? They have at least 9 gallons of gasoline.
So my car that's out here, I think I can put 13 gallons in it.
Yeah.
And so it's a hybrid. So in other words,
Yes.
if I'm driving in town, I actually get my best gas mileage when I'm in town,
Mhm.
because what will happen is every time I step on the brakes, it helps recharge the battery. If I'm going with my car, it's funny, if I'm going flat or slightly downhill about 40 miles an hour, the engine will turn off completely, and it's only using electricity to drive the vehicle. But when I'm on the freeway, if I'm going on a downgrade, I can be doing 60 miles a gallon. So it gets pretty good economy. If it's flat or slightly uphill, it'll of course drop off. But then you have vehicles like Tesla, and Nissan has a vehicle called the Leaf that are 100% electric. I think that the Teslas, typically, you can drive them around 200, 250 miles on a charge. They have models coming out that I think you can get up to around 800 miles on a charge. And they're all electric. They don't use any gasoline at all.
And they're pulling a lot of power, which could get severe off the grid. So why couldn't the electric companies collect a tax if we're not getting it off of the gasoline?
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but my understanding is if you buy, for example, a Tesla, and I think the cheapest Tesla you can buy $35,000 or more, that part of that $35,000 that you pay is actually providing the charging stations, electrical charging stations. And so when you pull up to one of those charging stations, there is no fee to plug the car in to charge the battery. But I think it's cooked into the original purchase price of the vehicle.
It doesn't go to the state though. It's not going to the state.
I'm not sure what the arrangement is with the state.
Okay, is there another question over
Doesn't
here?
go to the state.
Question. Chris, what is our time today?
Oh. 7:25.
7:25, okay, so we're running just fine. We have more questions? Yeah. All right, Pete has a question.
Do you have any thoughts about the recent Arizona Corporation Commission decision not to require purchase of biomass by the electric utilities, which, you know, a lot of the forest thinning projects is kind of essential to their viability? And so I think there's a big problem with thinning. I know Flagstaff's been very active. Do you have any thoughts about forest thinning and Thorpe and
There's definitely a separation between the legislature. It's actually a constitutional separation between the legislature and the Corp Commission. They're their own entity, their own government entity. I've had conversations with the APS, and for example, a challenge for companies like APS is to not only generate electricity, but also to meet all the clean energy standards at the same time. And one of the things that they've been talking about, which I applaud that they're looking at it, is to take one of the units at Cholla and convert it into a biomass facility where they could burn wood pulp and wood products. I know that you know, Brenda and I have been on tours in the sick graves, you know, eastern Arizona forests, and we've actually met with some of the loggers. We've been to the snowflake facility, the biomass facility, and seen how that operation, it's kind of interesting the way that that works is they have like, it's not molten, but they have extremely hot sand that they're pumping the biomass, the wood product onto the sand, which then it starts on fire, and then that creates the heat that then boils the water, which turns the turbines. And they have over at the Snowflake facility, they have like a General Electric big turbine that had been decommissioned back on the East Coast, and so they were able to buy it and bring it out to Snowflake. But they have problems with it too. They have, every once in a while, this process of burning the wood will start clumping together, and they have to be able to either get in there and break up those clumps or shut down the unit to break up the clumps. But what's nice about it is we're using biomass. For example, there's a logging facility. There's a logging facility right next to that biomass facility, and what they do is they'll take small diameter trees, they'll go ahead and turn them into lumber, and then all the wood chips that comes off then gets shipped over to the biomass facility, which then is burnt and is able to power houses. Another problem that we've had is just dealing with the Forest Service. So you go out to a major thinning project, and they've taken out hundreds and hundreds of trees, maybe thousands of trees, and you see these huge, huge piles of the slash that could be burnt and used in a biomass facility. And one of the problems we've had with the Forest Service is to grind up that material and put it on a truck while it's still wet causes huge amounts of weight in those semi-trucks. And so just leaving the material in the forest so it dries out a little bit, that was a huge challenge just to convince the Forest Service to allow us to do that. But we have made kind of some concessions with the Forest Service to allow us to do that. But with regard, I think the baseline question you had about the Corp Commission, I personally would love to see more forest activity where we're reducing the number of trees out in the forest. And I think it's wonderful. If I've heard ideas, suggestions where you can take the forest products and actually turn it into aviation fuel for aircraft. You can certainly, there's a mill over in the Snowflake area that takes the wood products and creates the little wood pellets that you heat your house with. So there's lots of uses for this forest material. I'm kind of passionate, as I mentioned, with this article. Over in NAU, their forestry department estimates that historically we had about 50 trees per acre in northern Arizona. And now we're between 500 and 1,000 trees per acre. So if you have 10 acres at 500 trees per acre and the ground is wet, it drinks 1.5 million gallons of water a day. So if we were better stewards and working with the Forest Service, working with Forefry, in reducing the density of trees in our forests and getting back to like 100 trees per acre, 50 trees per acre, what would be the benefits of that? One is that you'd have more water going into the aquifers as well as going down the hill to our farms and our communities, our cities and towns. The other thing we'd have is, am I not doing this again?
No, I'm going to raise my hand.
Oh, you're raising your hand. The other benefit of having a healthy forest, of course it's healthy, but you reduce catastrophic wildfires. So we've had some of the largest fires here in Arizona in the whole nation. The Walla Fire was the largest forest fire in U.S. history. You know, and you're talking, you know, was it billions of acres of trees that got burned up. Part of the reason why they got burned up is because the trees are so close together that the fire gets up into the crown and then up in the top of the tree and jumps from tree to tree to tree. Pretty much absolutely destroys the forest. If you then go in and try to log that burnt material and you have equipment that goes in on the scorched earth, it actually reduces the recovery or increases the recovery time to about 100 years for that forest to recover. So just leaving the forest alone is the best way to get it to recover. But if we could get people back in the forest, get our loggers back in the forest, take this wood product and actually utilize it as opposed to allowing it to burn up. It reduces forest fires, catastrophic forest fires. It increases our watershed. It reduces the amount of silt that gets into lakes, reservoirs like Roosevelt. We've lost capacity at Roosevelt when silt has washed down out from some of these forest fires into bodies of water like that. We were extremely fortunate with the Blue Ridge Fire not far from here. That Blue Ridge Fire, if it had been west another like 20 miles or so, it would have been right in the path of the watershed for our lake up there, the Blue Ridge Cragen Reservoir. And that's vital for Payson. So we were incredibly fortunate that fire was east and did not directly impact that watershed. It's a really powerful watershed as far as they drained Cragen a few years ago, and in one season the water came back up to level again. So it's a really important watershed for Payson.
Bill, let me just, on the same topic, I just want to ask Pete something, then you can get the last one, okay?
Thank you.
All right, so Pete.
Did you say that the Corporation Commission voted down our ability to use that third tower at Cholla
Yeah,
for APS?
On a 3-2 vote, they voted not to require the utilities to generate electricity from biomass, which sort of probably makes it so APS would not convert Cholla and might endanger the continued operation of the Noble Power plant that you referred to. So the forest advocates are very dismayed that, because the rocket fuel, they've been looking for a market for the biomass for 10 years. And the closest thing they came to it was generating power. And, basically the commission majority said, well, ratepayers shouldn't have to, it's a little more expensive than using, say, natural gas or solar. And so APS estimated it would cost an extra $5 a month.
Yeah.
And so they voted it down, and so nobody knows where to go next. And my question was whether there's anything the state can do that would kind of create a market for this biomass. The Corporation Commission is saying don't put it on the ratepayers. That doesn't mean the state could come up with some way to sort of get this market going so that we could get the city.
And we have a mill in Eager. It's a really old mill. It's been around for probably 80 or 100 years. And so they'll take the trees and mill it into usable lumber. The facility in Snowflake, again, they had the milling capability, small diameter trees. We have a mill that's set up over in the Williams area where they wanted to start producing like OSB for house construction, OSB sheets. So there's opportunities for things like that. It's just a matter of getting the investors. For example, Forfry, I was actually at the press conference when Jan Brewer was meeting with the Forest Service and announcing the Forfry program, and it's been so difficult to get a company, a stable company, to come in and actually create that infrastructure to harvest the wood and to utilize the wood. And so it's a challenge. I like what's happening, for example, with that pellet mill over in Show Low. Some of the problems that they're experiencing, including the small diameter mill in the Snowflake area, is just having a consistent supply of material, having enough logs to allow them to be profitable.
Okay, Bill's next, and this is the last
I
one.
find it curious and interesting that 50 years ago, last week, Neil Armstrong walked on the moon.
Yeah.
And that was a topic of many magazine covers, a lot of TV time, very exciting. 50 years ago, I'm 73. That's most of my life. And yet, we can't find anybody in the state of Arizona, and I'm from North Dakota, we don't have many people up there, who can cut down trees and make them available for these places that either burn them for power or make something out of the wood chip. I find that unbelievable.
Oh, we have,
That's it.
we have work to do. Okay,
And I wish it was different.
yeah. Okay,
Thank you,
Bob
everybody.
Ford.